years, I think 4 years plus, and this is a combination of municipality green teams for Atlantic County and Cape May County. And just reading this, I'll be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about it. 14 of 16 in Cape May County participate, and 22 of 23 in Atlantic County, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's awesome. And I know Ocean City's very active, and I know Jay, our mayor, would have liked to be here, and Joe Clark, because we, promote obviously the environment and being green. And Ralph has done an awesome job with his team of providing lectures. And we had last year, was it last year? The years have flown, when we did the water project. We had the up in our reference area.
Right.
So we try to partner and things like that. So it's awesome to have everybody here. And just a little advertisement for our library. If you're not part of the library or member, please check it out. We have awesome resources, not just environmental, but on business and health, and a lot of good programming as well. So welcome, enjoy tonight. Sure it'll be a great program, and thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I live in Upper Township, but this library is my main go-to library, in addition to Cape May County. But for the past 14 months, we've run a book club, a book discussion on Zoom. And this library, every time we do a book, they get 4 copies in here, and the people can sign it out for the month or 6 weeks before we have our discussion. So it's been a neat opportunity. So we actually met here, I was just checking, like 4 years ago. We had a workshop with a program called Sea Change Conversation, and that was a whole discussion about climate change. And it's good to be back here again. This is the first time we've been in person inside a building since I think 2019. We had our last hub meeting was in Egg Harbor Township in August. We met at the Reed's Farm, which is an extension of Steve & Cookie's restaurant, and had a really good turnout. It was about food insecurity, and we had a good turnout for that. So this evening, I hope, is going to be beneficial to you all. We're going to cover a lot of ground, some of it pretty fast, but the program is designed so that we can share resources after this is done, and you can have contact people to talk to, and we'll have the links for, I think, most of the slides you're going to see are going to be on the website maybe in a day or two, and so that'll be helpful too. So at this time I want to introduce Amy and have her come up. Amy is our co-chair with the Atlantic and Cape May County Hub. So Amy?
All right. Thank you, Ralph, and it's nice to see everyone. Thanks for being here. We're really very happy to have great speakers with us tonight, and folks from Green Teams to share information too. So we have a lot to, as Ralph mentioned, we have a lot to cover. First, I just want to recognize Kevin from Solar Landscaping. He's a Sustainable Jersey Gold sponsor, and so if you have any questions about community solar, his company does a lot across the state. So thanks for being here. If you didn't grab an agenda, just to let you know what's going to be happening, we'll have some speakers talking about grants, and then we'll take a little break around 7:15. You can grab one of those speakers and ask more questions, or have some refreshments and get to chat with each other, get to know some of the folks in the room. And then after that, we'll come back after 15 minutes at 7:30. We'll spend a little time hearing from Green Teams who have had success writing grants. And that's always really neat to hear some of the things that have been happening and how people have made that happen. I think we could just get started. We're really happy to be here at the library. This is a beautiful space, and I'm really, really glad that we have this opportunity. Our first speaker is Meghan Wren, and Meghan is a planner. And you might think, well, why are we having a planner? We're talking about grants. But really, for grants, you need to be ready for them. Opportunities come up when you're not necessarily, maybe with a short deadline. And it's really helpful when you know, you got your wish list together of things that your community might want to address in the future. When you have those ideas, it helps you to search for grants, and something you hear about it, then you're ready. So Meghan is a planner for the Office of Planning Advocacy, New Jersey Business Action Center at the Department of State. So come on up.
Thank you, Amy. And I'm pleased to be here. And I'm curious how many, I see a few familiar faces. And is everyone from Cape and Atlantic County? How many from Cape May County and Atlantic? Great. So in my job, and this is about my 4th year now working for the state, but I had a long career in the nonprofit sector where my primary job was grant writing. So I come at this from a different perspective, and I think probably all of you have been in a place where you sometimes see a grant opportunity and think, ooh, what can I do for that? Instead of saying, this is what we're planning to do and how can I fund it? And I think it's a lot healthier the second way, and you get closer to what you're trying to achieve that way. And I think Ralph asked me to come tonight, I think because he participated in a visioning session that I hosted in Commercial Township and facilitated that. And I'm going to talk from that perspective about visioning and public participation and engagement in that process, and making sure that what you're planning to do. And I should say I also wear the hat of Green Team Chair in Down Township in Cumberland County.
I'm sorry, people can't hear, that's all. Let me do it that.
Okay. And I just realized I wasn't standing close enough to it, so is that better?
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So Green Team Chair at Down Township, and I think that it's my mantra for tonight is going to be trying to have your actions reflect what your community needs, and getting input from the community on what they need, and trying to sort of be that green team that's doing what the community needs, not necessarily all of you know that you're the doers in your community, but it also, sometimes you just need to kind of check and make sure you're not just doing something because, it's your sort of pet project. Think about things from the perspective of the broader community and what it needs. And oftentimes, that you can be more passionate about that than something else, even once you know that everyone's behind it, and you'll get more support that way too. So I'm gonna zip through and apologize in advance for moving quickly, but I know I'm trying to squeeze a lot of slides into a small amount of time. So public engagement through visioning is gonna be my focus, and it's not progressing, is it? Okay, let me do it this way. I thought it was all set up to go, and it's moving on the screen.
Karen's coming. Sorry. Usually works well.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Sorry, I can get up.
No,
Okay.
it's fine. It bothers me, it doesn't work very well.
Well, now the whole idea of having the podium so that I could see where my slides are isn't working, because that's not progressing. But so I'm gonna kind of stand like this so I can see what I'm supposed to be saying. So one of the things that is a real focus of the state right now, and to me as a professional advocate and environmentalist for 40 years, I think there was a time when the general public, you said you're an environmentalist, and they say, oh, recycling. And I think we've gotten a more nuanced perspective. And personally for me, I feel like almost everything that falls into the bucket of environmentalism and improvements for communities should be looked at through the lens right now of climate change resilience. And so there will be that theme through my perspective tonight. And engaging, that's another sort of premise for, I think, good community action, is having that engagement of the folks in your community and to try to get everybody's input. And there's a lot of discussion these days about the social vulnerability index and looking at your community, because it's not always the people that have the greatest needs that are able to be the most active. And so I always feel, as a volunteer for the community, it's part of my job to try to make sure that I'm helping the voices be heard that don't have the time to come to an evening meeting because they're trying to put food on the table, So thinking about the most vulnerable in your community and trying to make sure that you're kind of getting their input somehow, or trying to meet their needs in your actions. And just a few of those sort of scary slides about where we're headed with climate change. And this is the trend of sunny day flooding basically in Atlantic City. You've probably seen some of these slides if you're in that mode at all. And this is the number of times that there's sunny day flooding where they have measured it in Atlantic City, with the time frame now in the 8 to 10 times a year, where they're expecting it to get to 240 times a year by 2100. And how many of you are in coastal towns? Quite a few. And so this is clearly an issue to be thinking about. And this is just one. One of our sister agencies, the DEP, you'll find amazing resources on their website. They have all sorts of data and resources for resiliency and climate change. And this is just one slide where I know we talk about it a lot in the course of planning with municipalities, is what are you planning for? And so you can kind of work with a community that is on top of things and knows all these, all this data, and you can pick a really, aggressive scenario to be working towards. Or if you're from a community like mine, where your mayor doesn't say the word climate change and doesn't necessarily acknowledge that it's happening, you might have to start a little slower and work towards something that is if you can imagine what things were like at Sandy, then you know that you have to be prepared for something like that, whether or not you're adding on 5 feet for sea level rise or not. That coastal erosion and storms are happening on the coast, and so you need to be prepared for them regardless. It's not just the water rising, there's also additional heat and temperature and different weather conditions, as we had our almost 70 degrees today in February. So the goals and principles of resilience actions are, these are just, I want to zip through, so I'm going to kind of flash some of these things without going over every word on the screen. And I think I'm probably preaching to the choir in suggesting that this is a direction that is important for people's future. There is, and being a kind of a land use nerd, there is requirement in the new municipal land use law that now says that municipalities have to do a resilience plan or a vulnerability assessment related to climate change when you do your next land use. Are any of you also involved in your land use boards? Just curious. Couple. I'm also an advocate for a lot of conversations between land use boards and OEMs, emergency management folks and green teams, and having sort of that mixing in the different people who are working for the community. And there is on our website for the Office of Planning Advocacy, which is sometimes it was called the Smart Growth Office, and it's had different names and been in different departments in the state, but we're essentially the organization that supports the State Planning Commission. So we're staff to that commission, and we have on the website we have some. This is a resilience guide post that helps municipalities kind of navigate. There's so much out there. This helps you meet the MLUL municipal land use law requirements for the vulnerability assessment that you'll have to be doing sometime soon. It kind of sort of like dummies down all of the stuff that's out there to a more easily followed process. And this is the overall process for resiliency, and I'm gonna focus on the visioning part. And I'm gonna zip through the slides that I presented at Commercial Township for their visioning session, because what I'm suggesting is that you can do something like this. There's their guidance for visioning for municipalities that suggests multiple occasions and a year-long process of preparations and facilitated meetings. And I guess I'm here to say that I think it's more important to make sure that you do it and get good feedback, and don't worry as much about spending a pile of money on a planner and a facilitator. And it's better to get the input than to focus as much on the process, I guess, if that's if that sounds so I'm gonna just kind of zip through. This is what we did, and this was focused on the plan endorsement process, our visioning at Commercial Township, so I won't go into great detail about that. But I think it is important to check in with the elected officials and the county, and get people at the table who are sort of responsible at the governmental level for planning. And I guess that's been my approach with our green team, is to try to be engaged and not be an outsider, and make sure that you're incorporating their input as well. We collected a lot of sort of facts and figures and demographics and information about the community to present to the community. So sometimes you can go through your daily life without really knowing the community, and I think having visioning be based on what's there today is an important element of the visioning process. And so just doing a little bit of research, and the census and the American Community Survey are your friends. This data is very readily accessible. Just Google it, and putting it together, you can cut this in half from what was presented, but I think it's important to have the basics that are shared with your community, and it helps you kind of visualize what the needs are. And if you find that you're consistently higher in unemployment, or if your income is in the community is an issue, then you kind of have a better sense of what some of the needs are of the community before you even start your feedback loop. So these are just the occupations, the poverty level, things like that, educational attainment. And by looking at some of these, you might decide that working with a school is a really important aspect of your community work, or housing. There's this is a community that's an issue to focus on potentially, and just sort of doing a scan of the community and sharing with the residents or the people that come out. And as you're putting the demographics together, it'll also help you decide who you should be targeting to try and make sure they come out to the meeting. And I don't think it's good enough to just accept the people that show up at an announced meeting. I think it's really important to do some legwork to get the people in the audience that are representative of the primary demographics of the area. I think I have another slide where I talk about the types of organizations and people that you should really work on twisting their arms. Your community, who to, how to get people out, but don't accept just the ones who are self-motivated to come out. Do some work to get the people there. And just putting together some of the, describing the community as a precursor to talking about what's there, what the future, what the vision might be for the future. I'm just zipping through because this is specific to commercial, but you get the idea. And I think by pulling this kind of information together, you have a sense of where you are today and where you might like to go. The status of planning piece is something that you know, when you go through and look at what your community already has in planning, you know, the idea of people going through all these planning efforts and then having their documents sit on a shelf somewhere instead of being implemented is a sad, you know, that's a sad occurrence. And there might be, you know, a county bike and pedestrian plan that has some projects that you could be taking on that are within reach and already vetted through a process, but they're just sitting on a shelf somewhere. So taking a look at what has already been done, what your re-exam plan, what your master plan says that it wants for the community, make sure you look through those things. There might be a, you know, a low-hanging fruit project that you could get a grant for that is already something that everyone decided was good for the community, and instead of, you know, just coming up with something on a whim. There are lots of plans already out there. And of course, being familiar with your zoning and it might seem a little dry, but I think having an understanding of what people before you have looked at and determined is where they want things to be and how they want the community developed, it's you know, that's a good way to know more about your community and look at the visioning. So a lot of times a master plan or a re-exam will actually already have a vision statement. There's a very good chance that it was developed before climate change was a consideration. And so, and a lot of communities have not always paid attention to their vulnerabilities, not just from climate change, but their social and economic vulnerabilities. So I think it's a good lens to kind of look through to reassess your current vision as to whether or not it takes those things into consideration. Just some of the things to think about when you're coming up with a vision statement. I think they've been reflected in the items that we've already talked about. Again, a lot of the vision statements that are out there, you'll find they've been recycled, and you know, they might have been developed back in the 90s, and you know, just, oh yeah, this is still good, we'll throw it in there, you know. So taking a close look and maybe shortening it a little bit to something that's, you know, really digestible. And before a visioning session in commercial, we talked to the mayor and some folks about what things they already knew were sort of hot topic items in their community, and we drew attention to those things in the visioning session. And there might be a way that the green team could, you know, could help with something that the town already knows is an issue. Maybe it's something that comes up at each, you know, anytime it's on the agenda, there's a full house at the meetings, you know, maybe there's a way that you can help, you know, meet a need that's out there. And there, you know, in getting a sense of those questions, then you can think about, you know, certainly Sustainable Jersey has a lot of grant opportunities, and I know someone's talking about some other opportunities tonight as well. If you have a list of actions in a whole lot of different arenas, there, you know, you may find that there's a funding source that can do something that wasn't on your radar, but when you went through this process, you realized that it was a really important need for the community. And at the time of a visioning session, sharing information about the vulnerability from climate change, I think I've mentioned that already, but there's all sorts of information out there. Actually, this is out of context, but I did also do a presentation in Harrison Township, and they had recently had the tornado go through, and I think it's not something that they had really thought that they'd have to be contemplating. And I think there are a lot of extreme weather conditions and things that, you know, we really need to have considered and start thinking about. And that's why I think it's important to have emergency management be part of your visioning. And a lot of times, you know, in some of the towns that I've worked in, the emergency management has all kind of been on the side, and there hasn't been as much communication between the, you know, that group of folks and the green team or the land use board. And I really think that they're an important player, and making some, you know, making an effort to have conversations, see where they are, what they think is important, and incorporate them in a visioning session. I think is if there's anyone, type of participant that it's worth spending the time on to get them there, I would put them in that category. And we really only had about 30, I think we said it was gonna be 30 minutes, I think we went for almost an hour and a half, because it was such a good turnout and we didn't wanna stop it. But, we did some brainstorming and, just the traditional brainstorming rules, supporting everybody and we did have to direct some of the conversation, because there was kind of a hot ticket item in the town at that time, and the mayor reminded folks that we were there to think long-term and not just to talk about that one issue. And some of the questions that we asked: what would your ideal community look like? What things would you like to change? Make declarative statements. I think a vision statement is meant to be upbeat, and so stating what you envision seeing as opposed to what the problems are is a better approach for visioning. And again, some of the if you're working towards developing a vision statement and potentially looking to the next step past that, having the green team be engaged in resiliency and having, sometimes a community might have a need for a specific resilience team, not just a green team, and the green team there might be, overlap between what the green team already has on its agenda and an agenda that's more specific to resilience, where you might wanna have some folks in addition to your green team at the table. So you might wanna have like a quarterly meeting that's a resilience focused one that has some of the other folks involved. And some of the people that it's beneficial to have engaged are some of these folks. And don't leave out your town's engineer also. That's an important, I think, person to, or consulting firm if that's what it is. Some of the resources that DEP has are very, very helpful, and you could get lost for days on their website with all the information that's out there, and I highly recommend if you have some time to do that. There's also some federal tools that are worth looking at as well. The New Jersey Adapt tool is being added to all the time. How many of you have already used that? Only a few. Okay, well, this is definitely worth spending some time on. New Jersey Adapt has multiple tools within it, and they're adding additional ones. They're actually working on heat-related tools right now. There's a municipal snapshot, the climate snapshots. They've already developed some information for your community. You can put in your town's name, and they've already done and compiled some of the important information all in one place. So I would highly recommend you doing that, looking at that. There's the vulnerability information, flooding information. It's just literally you could spend quite a bit of time poking around there, and you can print things off. You can add, for the flood mapper, you can add different components, like whether you want to look at a storm surge or a sea level rise or a combination of the two, and print where the water would be in your town. There's a lot. You could have a whole other session just on that one, Climate Adapt and the flood mapper. These are just some of the